Hello everyone, welcome to the Backpackers podcast, this amazing project about types of tourism. Today, in fact, we are going to talk about some interesting types of tourism such as slow tourism, religious tourism, among others. You are listening to some enthusiastic students of UCAMI, a university from Misiones, Argentina, who are going to give a short and sweet presentation of what we found really amazing and caught our attention. Tourism, which, according to the official definition of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, it comprises the activities of persons traveling to and staying in places outside the usual environment for not more than one consecutive year for leisure, business, and other purposes. We all know there are many types of tourism. In fact, it is really shocking that the total amount is more than 56 types. Wow, really astonishing, isn't it? Within them, there are some environmentally friendly, cheap, and expensive ones, and even some that are really creepy. There is a type of tourism to suit every taste, taking into account your interests, your money, your age, and many other things. I am absolutely sure that if you don't like the typical and classic types of tourism like sun and beach, you can look for many others to enjoy from this beautiful experience. Okay, so as not to make this too long, we are going to start. Please be comfy, get yourself a drink or a snack, and enjoy this presentation. We are Ingrid Hartwig, Marcos Oliva, Ana Paula Mayer, Eliana Pan, Agustina Correa, and Irupe Duarte, with the special help of our language teacher, Karin Kunka. Stay tuned and enjoy this podcast.
Have you ever heard about slow tourism? If not, have you ever considered the impact that tourism can have on the environment? If you're interested in traveling and the environment, this is definitely a type of tourism for you. The name may give you a clue, but it is much more than that. Firstly, we're going to talk about its beginning. So, slow tourism can be defined as a branch of a broader philosophy called the slow movement. The father of this movement is the Italian sociologist Carlo Petrini, who began to spread his ideas in the late 1980s. The ideology was initially focused on countering the effects of the fast food boom, but it was later spread to many other areas of life, including tourism. Having said this, slow tourism encourages travelers to forget the canon of the tourist industry and enjoy the destination from a more conscious and sustainable approach. It is an alternative to mass tourism, which is responsible for the loss of identity of communities or their unsustainable growth. It also aims at achieving maximum integration of the traveler with the destination, through contact with local people, the enjoyment of local gastronomy, space for improvisation, proximity to nature, and the greatest possible reduction of the impact cost. Its development is sustainable, slow, and respectful of nature, culture, and people as well. Slow tourists are generally between 25 and 65 years old, with the stays that usually last at least a week in a single destination, doing 1 or 2 activities per day and avoiding planning each day of their trip, giving space for experimentation. Besides, they value slow food, such as 0-kilometer food. And what is that? For those who don't know, this is food that has not traveled more than 50 kilometers or that literally has traveled 0 kilometers, therefore its name. In general, the destinations chosen for this type of tourism are not the big capital cities or the main urban centers, but places on the tourist off circuit. Slow destinations are considered to be those with less than 50,000 inhabitants. Perhaps you may be wondering, are these places real? Sure. Let's pay a look at a few of them. In the world, Italy is not only the country where this movement emerged, but it also has the largest number of cities certified as slow in the world, 84 specifically. Some of the best known are Amalfi, Capalbio, Chiavenna, Positano, and Trevi. This is notably supported by the government, as Italy's strategic tourism plan implemented curious measures such as giving away 100 buildings to promote slow tourism and limiting the number of visitors entering the Cinque Terre coastal area, which is a natural heritage site. The country also has a number of slow routes, a kind of circuit that passes through various points of interest, such as the Via degli Dei. Other destinations include the island of El Hierro, the smallest of the Canary Islands in Spain. This is the world's first self-sufficient island, as it is powered by natural resources such as wind, water, and sun. But what about slow tourism in Argentina? Does it even exist, or is it just a project far from being achieved? Well, let's see it. In the country, Mar de las Pampas is the pioneer city in subscribing to the principle of the slow movement. This coastal city on the Atlantic coast is a true paradise of forests and unpopulated beaches. Its motto is to preserve and respect its environment as much as possible. In this way, the site has very few buildings, as the aim is not to overbuild in order to minimize any environmental impact that could damage the natural environment. Therefore, the few houses at the same time have the same architectural style and are built with environmentally friendly materials and techniques. In addition, most of the inhabitants ride bicycles or walk. Another peculiarity that makes the difference is that there are no fast food restaurants. All its bars and gastronomic establishments offer tasty homemade food. And I know what we are all thinking. What about our province? What about Misiones? Isn't it a potentially slow tourism destination? Well, there are no slow destinations as such, but there are some that are way similar. One of them is, for example, Posada Puerto Bemberg, located in Puerto Libertad, which is a private nature reserve surrounded by trails, waterfalls, river, vegetation, and typical fauna, which has been certified as sustainable tourism by the Rainforest Alliance. The hotel has a gourmet restaurant with international and regional cuisine, which offers vegan, vegetarian, and gluten-free dishes, and the vegetables are mostly homegrown. There is also a swimming pool surrounded by jungle, as well as sailing, trekking, biking, and other activities that go along with the philosophy of healthy tourism. On the other hand, La Lechuza is an agroecological farm located in the city of General Alvear, 7 kilometers away from Oberá. It was founded by a Swiss-Argentine family with the aim of generating an agroecological production that respects the cycle of nature. They offer the Granja Escuela program to receive visits from educational centers, guided tours for tourists and generals, and accommodation in bungalows. The agenda is completed with various courses, workshops, and conferences on topics related to organic farming, food, and healthy living practices. They offer their visitors 0-kilometer food, as well as hiking, cycling, and trekking activities. And that was our last stop. I hope you have enjoyed our little slow tourism journey and that you now have a new perspective of tourism and its impact. Because personally, I think that sustainability is here to stay.
Organizing is not your thing? Then package tourism is for you. Package tourism, or package vacation, refers to the type of holiday arrangement that comprises transport and accommodation advertised and sold together by a tourism agency. In general, package tours typically include all transfers between airports, harbors, stations, and hotels, to ensure tourist and first-class accommodation with private facilities, cruises, rental cars, entrance fees to attractions, and insurance. The types of packages available in today's market are vast and varied. This ensures all consumers' needs and desires are met. Package tours can be further broken down into specific tour types, such as special interest tours, adventure tours, city or regional tours, and group tours. So let's see what they are about. Special interest tours are designed around a particular interest area, which could include art, food and wine, sports, culture, or agricultural activities. They may include an expert or a celebrity guide who relates to the theme of a tour. Adventure tours are designed to allow the consumer to participate in their area of interest. They generally are physical and require a certain level of fitness. Some examples of this tour type include diving, rock or mountain climbing, horse riding, skiing, or cycling. City or regional tours normally last for one full day or less. They follow a fixed itinerary and visit areas of interest in a specific place, whether that is historic, religious, or cultural. Refreshments or meals are often included. Finally, group tours also follow a fixed and pre-arranged itinerary, and they often only take place depending on the number of travelers. But where does package tourism come from? The first organized tours date back to Thomas Cook, who on 5th of July 1841 chartered a train to take a group of temperance campaigners from Leicester to a rally in Loughborough. With the gradual decline of visits to British seaside resorts after the Second World War, Thomas Cook began promoting foreign holidays, particularly Italy, Spain, and Switzerland in the early 1950s. In recent years, dynamic packaging became increasingly used in package holidays booking procedures, enabling consumers to build their own package of flights, accommodation, and rental cars instead of a predefined package. Dynamic packaging allows guests to create their own vacation, similar to a private or custom tour. This method lets tourists use a company's itinerary or create their own, allowing more flexible options while using an agency's services. An example of this type of tourism can be seen in the series Friends, where the group travels to the UK to attend Ross's wedding. And we can see they travel all together, they stay at a hotel with all meals included, and they even take a sightseeing bus around the city. So now that you know what package tourism is, can you think of any other example that you may have seen in your favorite TV series or movie?
Let's get a bit more traditional and talk about religious tourism. Religious tourism is the trip that an individual makes for religious purposes in order to carry out spiritual practices. But it is not related to visiting places such as churches or religious monuments, as this would fall into the category of heritage or artistic tourism. The relationship between tourism and religion is like a search for balance between the modern world and a person's own search for divinity. This convergence between the physical, walking, traveling, and the spiritual, such as religious practices, takes place through pilgrimages in general. But what exactly is a pilgrimage? It is defined as a journey for religious reasons, externally to a holy place and internally for spiritual and self-knowledge purposes. Besides pilgrimage, main activities in religious tourism include veneration of sacred objects and places, purification of the soul through practices such as prayer or meditation, spiritual retreats, visits to ancient temples or prayer centers that were part of the history of religion, among others. As regards its origins, humanity has always traveled to religious centers they consider sacred in order to feel closer to their deities and what they represent. Pilgrimage was and still is seen as an individual sacrifice in honor of sanctities, consolidating itself around shrines, ruins of ancient temples, or places where some religious myth is alleged to have taken place, like miracles or apparitions. This, in many cases, has ended up shaping cities and building tourist and commercial infrastructure around them. One of the oldest examples of this is the present-day city of Delphi, where in the 8th century before Christ, a temple of the god Apollo was erected, leading to the creation of a pilgrimage network linking the city with the whole of Greece. Thus, the polis sent sacred delegations to consult the oracle about public but also private affairs, mostly to validate decisions divinely. As regards destinations, we can find many places people travel to for spiritual or religious reasons. I'm going to mention just a few, the most important ones, and you may already know about them. On a global scale, we have the Vatican City, visited by billions of Christians. It is a sovereign city-state, and it's where the Papal Basilica of St. Peter and the Holy See can be found. The Holy See is the universal government of the Catholic Church. The Pope is the ruler of both the Vatican City-State and the Holy See. So you can see why it's one of the most famous religious destinations. People go there massively, especially on special or important days for Catholics. Then we have Jerusalem in Israel. This city is sacred for Christians, Muslims, and Jewish people, and we all know this has always brought about some serious geopolitical conflicts. Nevertheless, it is still visited by billions of people of these three religions. Jewish people visit, for example, the Wailing Wall. Muslim people visit the Temple Mount, where the Al-Aqsa Mosque can be found. This mosque is one of the greatest and oldest houses of prayers for Islam in Jerusalem. As for Christians, they visit the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And there are lots of other important places in Jerusalem, and these were just some of them. Continuing with Islam, Mecca is the most important destination for Muslim people. Muslims must visit this place at least once in their lifetime. This practice is called Hajj and is one of the pillars of this religion. It commemorates the first pilgrimage made by the Prophet Muhammad to the city of Mecca, built around a stone structure that the Prophet Ibrahim or Abraham built in the name of Allah. The pilgrimage lasts several days and consists of multiple stages, such as the visit to Mount Arafat to repent of one's sins, the stoning of the devil on the third day, the sacrifice of an animal, and walking around the Holy Mosque 7 times. Lastly, we have Varanasi and the river Ganges in India. Pilgrimage to Varanasi and the river Ganges dates back to the 7th century. For several centuries, thousands of Hindus make the pilgrimage to the city to bathe and purify themselves in the Ganges, or to dive there, in which case the ashes of the deceased are thrown in the river. Why? Because they believe in reincarnation. So by bathing in the Ganges or by spreading their ashes in the river, they break the never-ending cycle of reincarnation. We also have religious destinations here in Argentina, whether they be Christian, like Luján, Buenos Aires, that receives massive amounts of pilgrims during the year on special dates, as this is the patron saint of the Republic of Argentina, or pagan, such as the Difunta Correa, for example, whose sanctuary was built 200 years ago, where a group of muleteers found the body of the Olinda Correa. The miracle here was that she was still breastfeeding her baby, even though she was dead. People go there to pray for the Difunta Correa to fulfill their wishes, or to thank her for things she already gave them. The most common practice is to offer her water bottles and car plates. Now that you know what religious tourism is about, can you believe the individual sacrifices people make to feel closer to their faith? It's an amazing phenomenon.
What comes to your mind when I say the word holiday? Probably tan skin, a beer at the beach, or perhaps something cozier. like a warm cup of coffee sitting by the fire in a cottage in the south of Argentina. But what about a sightseeing tour around the radioactive streets of Fukushima? Or a trip around the slums in Mexico, guided by one of Pablo Escobar's partners? Yes, maybe a picture at the suicide forest in Japan won't look so cute on your Instagram profile. Believe it or not, these kinds of destinations are what some people choose for their vacations. It is a type of tourism called dark tourism. Dark tourists are interested in places that have a story of death or tragedy behind them. I think most of us are dark tourists to some extent. Although it may sound weird, you must admit that dark places are at least very interesting. Dark destinations can be directly related to death, like, for example, mausoleums or cemeteries, or indirectly related to it. For example, sites of volcanic destructions or places where natural disasters took place. Some of them are really well known, like the 9/11 Memorial, that receives 5 million tourists a year, and it is probably the most visited dark site today. Some are less known, like the Polygon in Kazakhstan, the primary testing venue for the Soviet Union's nuclear weapons. You may think that dark tourists are morbid or unethical people, but this is a stereotype that does not fit the profile of these tourists at all. Most of them are motivated to visit these places just because they find them very educational and interesting, and want to feel connected to the historical events in a more direct way, not only read about them in books. But holidays are all about fun and relaxing. Why would people go to these depressing destinations instead, you may think? Well, it is true that dark destinations may be quite emotional and moving, but they can be so inspiring and teach us a lot of things about humanity and history. There is always room for knowledge, even on vacation. It is important to clarify that dark tourism is not the same as danger tourism. People do not visit active war zones or places with ongoing conflict that represent a great risk for the traveler. Another important point is the conduct that needs to be shown at these places. It is essential to be respectful. Some places even require a certain dress code. Now that we have clarified some concepts, let's take a look at some of the most interesting dark destinations in the world. First, we have Auschwitz in Poland. This was a Nazi concentration camp built in the 1940s. Nowadays, you can visit it and know more about the living conditions of the people that were unfairly taken there. You can even see the remains of the gas chambers where they were killed. It is not a fun and bright place to visit, but it is very important to know more about the history of one of the most important and tragic parts of the 20th century. We can also mention the 9/11 Memorial and Museum. Almost 3,000 people lost their lives during this attack. Their names are listed on a bronze plaque in the center of the monument. It is a sad place, built in order to remember the victims forever. The entrance is free. You can find a screen with pictures of the victims that show information about who they were when you click on their faces. Chernobyl is another destination that became more popular in the last few years. Home to the worst nuclear disaster in history, it is nowadays one of the main tourist attractions in the area. Visits are guided and follow strict security guidelines. You are not allowed to touch anything nor sit on the floor. Once you're ready to leave, the workers scan the radiation levels on your body and remove them if they are too high. The most interesting thing is the ghost city of Pripyat. Everything stays the same as it was decades ago. You can walk around as if you were living in the Soviet Union. The Crime Museum in Vienna, Austria, is definitely made for brave people. Pictures of murder scenes, mummified heads of criminals, mutilated body parts. Yes, this exhibition is not somewhere I will go with my kids. In fact, there are signs that advise people not to. However, it is one of the oldest buildings in the district, with 20 rooms of interesting exhibitions and plenty of background history. Definitely a must if you're in Vienna and if you can take it. Now that you know a bit more about dark tourism, are you ready to plan your next trip somewhere creepier than usual?
So now we are going to talk a little bit about architectural tourism. I'm pretty sure that you have a photograph taken during a holiday in front of a church, an old building, or even a monument. So you might have experienced architectural tourism without even noticing. The term architectural tourism means going to a travel destination to see historical monuments and architecture. This type of tourism is one of the most sustainable ones. It doesn't use many resources, and because architecture is so much linked to the culture of the destination, it also highlights the tangible heritage of a place. I believe that one of the best things about traveling is to get to know other cultures and lifestyles, the past and history of those places, and architecture is a living proof of them all. So next, we have a small list of the best places to experience this type of tourism. First, we have Athens in Greece as an example of classical. Visiting the architecture and world-renowned ruins in Athens is like taking a step back in time to ancient Greece, where stonework dates back to 400 BC. Temples are held up by centuries-old columns, and sculptures of deities are a common sighting. Then we have Rome in Italy as an example of Baroque. The city of Rome has exemplified and adapted to pretty much every architectural style since the ancient classical movement, such as Romanesque, Gothic, or the Renaissance, you name it. Today, the city is one of the biggest centers of 17th century Baroque architecture, known for its grandiosity, opulence, and contrast between light and shadow. Visit Rome's St. Peter's Square, Santi Luca e Martina, or the Trevi Fountain to see the dramatic style in person. Then we have the city of Hanoi in Vietnam as an example of French colonial. French colonial is a style of architecture used by the French during colonization. The style is especially prominent in Southeast Asia, as exemplified by the early 20th century buildings in Hanoi. Notable examples include the Presidential Palace, completed in 1906, and the Hanoi Opera House, completed in 1911. Two bright yellow, ornate reminders of the French rule in Vietnam. Then we have Miami in Florida as an example of Art Deco. Miami Beach Historic District comprises the largest collection of Art Deco architecture in the world. To transform Miami into an ultra-modern and luxury tourist destination during the 20s and 30s, architects turned to deco symmetrical and geometrical patterns, floral and animal motifs, and pastel colors to invoke fluidity and movement, which are synonymous with the city today. Then we have Barcelona in Spain as an example of Catalan Modernism. Taking cues from the modern Gothic and Oriental techniques, the early 19th century Catalan architect Antoni Gaudí wanted to create organic urban spaces in the city he loved. A walk around Barcelona leads you through the largest concentration of his signature ceramic and stained glass mosaics, as well as his undulating stonework and ironwork, which include Park Well, and culminate in his unfinished masterpiece, La Sagrada Familia. Next, we have Florence in Italy as an example of the Renaissance. Florence is the birthplace of the late 14th century movement. The era's embellished but symmetrical and geometrical structures such as columns and domes, and makes emphasis on realism and the human form departed from the irregular and severe lines of the medieval period. They are most visible at Florence, Duomo, and Basilica of Santa Maria Novella. Then we have Marrakech in Morocco as an example of Moorish architecture. The presence of riads, that are palaces with interior courtyards and gardens and open skylights, are specific to Morocco and essential to Islamic design because of their emphasis on privacy. The lack of street-level windows and the use of clay walls also lends itself to the feeling of intimacy and grace. The density of Marrakech riads, combined with the city's mosques, minarets, and mosaics, makes it an exceptional place to view the Moorish architecture of the 12th through 17th centuries. And finally, we have Oxford in England as an example of Gothic revival. The poet Matthew Arnold once called Oxford the city of the dreaming spire. Taking notes from early medieval stonework, the towers of Oxford's mid-19th century Gothic revival skyline define the city, embedding it with a sense of gravity and academic prowess, just like its namesake university. But let's not forget about Misiones. As we know, the province is a melting pot of cultures mixed all together in the middle of the tropical forest. Here we have example of architecture that shows and reflects the migratory flows that the province received over the years, making it a perfect example of history, culture, and architecture are intrinsically linked. Some of the most iconic places that you can visit are the Correo Argentino building in Posadas. Maybe one of the most iconic places in Posadas, designed by Mario Soto and Raúl Rivarola. It is located right at the heart of the city. If you live in Posadas, I highly recommend you to lift your head up and take a look at this building that shows the first steps towards a more modern architectural style. Then we have La Escuela Normal Superior No. 1 Domingo Sarmiento in Leandro en Alem. A beautiful piece of brutalism in Misiones. This gorgeous building was also designed by Mario Soto and Raúl Rivarola. The structure is simply breathtaking and placed with geometrical shapes and patterns as well as materials using concrete, steel, and glass. Then we have the Bamberg Port in Puerto Libertad. First, a home owned by the Bamberg family, it has touches of rural architecture and is now one of the most iconic boutique hotels in Misiones. The allure of Puerto Bamberg is that the house is in pristine conditions. Entering the main house is like walking back in time to the 1930s. Then we have the Sulzer Power Plant. If the name Sulzer Power Plant doesn't ring a bell, perhaps it's because we all know it as La Usina, located right opposite the Brete Beach. What used to be the power plant that provided electricity to the city is now under renovations to become a future culture center. Initiatives like this are needed to save buildings that reflect the culture and history of the city. So, my dear backpackers, we urge you to go into the world and seek what type of tourism suits you the best, because travel is the only thing that you buy that makes you richer.